Can I be really honest with you all? I watched that first 20 minutes at the Emirates Stadium. I was there live watching PSG bop the ball about, and I thought, okay, I'm not sure we're at this level. And then I watched Barcelona and the way they just put just constant pressure on Inter Milan's goal, the passing, the movement, the fluidity. And I watched the way Inter Milan counterattacked on Barcelona with a purpose. And honestly, for a second I thought, I'm not sure we're at the level of these guys. I have to be really honest, I'm not sure we are. And then I took a step back and I went, no, we are. There are things we do well. We're going to talk about that in a sec. But all of this has taught me a massive lesson. This week I've learned so much about Arsenal in terms of the level we're at, what we do really well, but also what we can improve. And actually, to be honest, it's left me all feeling pretty positive about Arsenal's future. I want to explain why. But first, we've got to do a little bit of critique. We've got to talk about the things we didn't do well, because ultimately, we are losing this Champions League first leg semi-final as we go to Paris. Let me just talk about some key data I've got from Arsenal, PSG, Barca and Inter from those first legs. I want to compare Arsenal's numbers to some of theirs for some really key data I think Arsenal need to improve on. Now, what we've got here, let's start with shots. Arsenal had 10 shots, PSG 11, Barca 19, Inter Milan 7. Inter Milan getting 7 shots off with only 27% possession too, so they're pretty efficient themselves with what they did have of the ball. When you look at shots from distance, Arsenal and Inter Milan with 2 are behind PSG's 4 and crucially Barcelona's 8. And this leads me to the shot maps I want to show you on Cannon Stats, because I think it tells you a lot about the style of football these teams play. Let me go through it very quickly. We've got Arsenal's here, just have a little quick look at it. What we can see, the size of the circle tells you how high the XG is for that particular shot. Now I'm going to show you PSG's. Again, lower XG shots, but quite a few more in there. And Barcelona's, I mean, they were absolutely peppering the goal here. And as you can see, the Ferran Torres goal in yellow there was the highest XG chance of the 3 maps we've seen there. But if I just take you back to the Arsenal one, having seen all 3 of them now, what I want to show you here is Arsenal, it tells you a lot, I think, about the style of play. The Arsenal are quite close to that 6-yard area. They're quite high XG opportunities, 4 of them in particular, 3 of them were on target. I think Arsenal's style of play, and we've talked about this a lot before, is to be very patient, is to be quite slow and methodical in build up. We've heard Ola Aina talk about it, the Forest fullback, talking about how Arsenal are constantly moving, constantly rotating, and he described it as being quite difficult to play against Arsenal. But Arsenal can, through sheer persistence and movement and rotations, find a way to eventually work themselves into quite a high XG opportunity. But when I was watching the 2 games, when I was watching Arsenal, PSG and Barcelona Inter Milan, I never felt that Arsenal had a sustained period where they were dominant for 20 minutes like PSG, where we had them on the ropes in the way they had us on the ropes for 20 minutes. I also don't remember a period of the game in which they seemed to be asking loads of questions of the goalkeeper like Barcelona were of Inter Milan. And also don't remember a period of the game in which we were kind of playing forward with purpose and counter-attacking in the way Inter Milan were when Barcelona were on top, in the way PSG were on top against us. I don't think Arsenal did those things quite as well, but if I take you back to the data I showed you, as you can see, Arsenal's XG of 1.6 was higher than PSG's 1.1, Barca's 1.5 and Inter's 1.1. So why is that? You know, why were Arsenal able to rack up the highest XG of the 4, but be the only team that didn't score, and yet also look like the only team that never had quite as much conviction in their attacking football as the other 3? And I think it's because we are able over 90 minutes to work 2 or 3 really good opportunities. But with those 2 or 3 opportunities, first, they've got to fall to players that you rely on. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But secondly, they come quite sporadically and quite, in sort of 5-10 minute bursts. They don't come that frequently. Whereas watching Barca, watching PSG, even watching Inter Milan, there were periods in which I felt, wow, they've got the other team really struggling here. And I'm not sure Arsenal do that quite as well. I'm not sure Arsenal can sustain pressure. And what I mean by sustain pressure is, okay, maybe Martinez through on goal, he has that shot. But you know what? It's followed up by a corner where they've had to punch it clear. And then another shot's come flying in. And then there's, cross into the box, they've made 2-3 clearances, a bit of a scramble. When did Arsenal ever have PSG scrambling and struggling? And I think the other 3 teams are a lot better at doing that. Let me just show you Barcelona's average, shot map one more time. Look at them, just peppering the goal. And yes, the XG, the quality of that chance isn't as high as, apart from the Ferran goal, almost all of them are lower XG opportunities than the Trossard, Martinelli, and there's a third one in there I can't remember. They were big chances, sure. I think it must have been the Martinelli one when Saka crossed to the back post. But Barcelona had Inter Milan scrambling and working hard, and I'm not sure we had PSG ever quite doing that. Shots from distance, quality shots from distance. Look at them. Look at you can see there the shots on target, right? I know we've got, so 10 of them were on target. You can see how many of them actually weren't even near the 6-yard box. From a bit of distance, they were asking questions. Arsenal can absolutely learn from that to have a little bit more shot variety. But the other thing I want to show you in the data here is the forward passes. Because with 225, Arsenal come behind PSG's 254. And Barcelona's 420. They've got more than Inter in terms of forward passes, but crucially, look at the forward pass percentage. Arsenal come last with 57.8% behind PSG's 58, Barca's 61.5, and Inter's 64.2. We know that we can go side to side. Why do we do that a lot? Probably because we're not as comfortable going down the middle. We're not as technically secure as we want to be going down the middle, going forward in the way the other three teams are. Inter Milan attacked with a purpose. Every time they did get the ball, they wanted to get their wing backs high up the pitch. Dumfries and DiMarco, they had a tough time defensively, certainly DiMarco, but going forward, wow, right, they caused them problems. And actually, they nearly scored another on the counter-attack with Mkhitaryan getting in beyond. So there were moments for Inter where they went forward with a purpose, scoring 3 goals to them from set pieces. Of course, I understand that. But also PSG and Barca threading the ball through the middle, picking up the ball in zone 14 and those pockets inside and outside the penalty area. And actually, you're getting Arsenal pulling side to side, running backwards, looking behind them at players who are making runs. And Arsenal were really, really struggling to deal with that. But when you look at the 11s, PSG started with Dembele as a false 9, and if I show you Barcelona, they also had Ferran Torres as a false 9, with also a distinct lack of physicality in there, because Pedri, Olmo and De Jong, not players that, yes, they're buzzy, they get around, but not sort of 6'2" players who will kind of use their physicality, height and frame to bully teams. So when you look at that, Arsenal, who typically play with a Marino up front, but actually went with Trossard this time, they've struggled to access central areas, but PSG and Barcelona have shown you with the right coaching, the right movement, and the right technicians, you can access players in those areas. You can get those defenders pulled out of position, struggling, thinking, oh, do I go to him, do I not? What was the moment where Dani Olmo, I think, received the ball with his back to goal, 2-3 defenders round, and through sheer grit, determination, a little bit of skill, he got round and got a shot through on goal. That was straight through the heart of Inter Milan's defence. When does Ødegaard do that? When does Trossard do that? Trossard a little bit more, to be fair, but still not enough. And I think there's something Arsenal can learn from that. Passes through the middle of the pitch, forward passes, and actually having a little bit of variety to our play and build up. From that, I take that Arsenal, I think, need to be we need a little bit more technical security in midfield. But also, I don't think the answer is necessarily just getting a 6'2", 6'3" target man. I think we need someone who's going to help us get into that area a little bit more. That's got to come from Ødegaard too. That's got to come from our central midfielders. Now, the other data I want to show you is this. I want to show you the Champions League scorers from the semi-final first leg. But I want to show you their GA for the season too, their goals and assists. Dembele with 45 goals and assists, Thuram with 27. Dumfries got 2 goals against Barcelona, he's got 14 for the season. Yamal with 39 goals and assists, Rafinha with 55. Ferran Torres, who isn't even a starter for Barcelona, with 23 himself. Trossard and Martinelli coming with 18 and 15. Only Dumfries, a wing-back, has less than those players. So what am I trying to tell you here? The other big thing I learned is that these opportunities need to fall to players that are actually used to putting that ball in the back of the net, that fundamentally used to getting high numbers, high output numbers, that on this stage aren't going to be fussed because it's something they've been doing again and again and again and again and again this season. Now, Bukayo Saka is probably the only player in our squad who can deliver on that front, but our biggest opportunities fell to Trossard, Martin. I don't want to be too harsh on them, especially Trossard, because actually his output is very good for how in and out the team he is. But my point is, these guys have been doing it so regularly this season. And actually, Trossard and Martinelli in that moment aren't that used to putting the ball in the back of the net. There's a great comment, I think it was on my match report for this game, for Arsenal PSG, and someone said, we need players who are used to getting goals, not players who when they score we go, oh, that's a pleasant surprise. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. If Martinelli had scored, we wouldn't go, yeah, that's what Martinelli does, right? He scores in big games, big goals. You know, in Champions League semi-finals, we've gone, wow, you know, fair play, he stepped up. And that is something Arsenal are going to have to address in this window. They're going to have to address adding forwards. It doesn't have to be 6'2", 6'3", 30-goal-a-season strikers, but forwards you can rely to get output. And actually, when you look at the big opportunities, they didn't fall to us, to players that actually can definitely always say, yeah, they're going to produce a big moment, Trossard more so. But when you look at the GA of the other players that did provide the big moments for their teams, they are used to having goals. They're used to scoring. I mean, Dumfries as a wing-back himself gets in on the action. They're used to having big moments for their clubs. Another big thing Arsenal are going to have to learn from when it comes to this week and the Champions League semi-finals, and actually I don't know, the masterclasses that I think some of these other managers put on. Now, more things I learned. Don't write off players. That's a big thing I've learned, because in the quarterfinals, we saw Real Madrid fans longing for Dani Ceballos. I saw Inter Milan start with Henrik Mkhitaryan in midfield, and I saw Wojciech Szczesny starting in goal for Barcelona. He actually played very well sweeping at the back, because obviously Barcelona plays high line. So with all this criticism of Martin Odegaard, for example, who's been really struggling, don't write players off so easily, because I never thought Szczesny, Mkhitaryan and Dani Ceballos would be playing for three of the biggest clubs in the world and actually be quite important players, very important players for the clubs in those moments like Champions League semi-finals or whatever. Here we are talking about Martin Odegaard and saying it might be time to move on from him. Let's learn that players come in and out of form, because 23-24 Martin Odegaard, I was close to calling one of the best midfielders in the world, potentially world class. When I look at other players that have been in and out of form like Martinelli, you can talk about whether there's something they lack on a technical or tactical level that these other players in the other semi-finals have got to that they haven't, and you can talk about all that. But I'm not ready to move on. I want to add players that can come and complement them, give us something different, and maybe raise their level too. Because ultimately, good coaching and good players around you can just do so much for the players we already have. So don't write off players is one thing I've learned. Secondly, don't write off Mikel Arteta, because while I think he probably struggled tactically the most out of the four managers in these semi-finals, I think Enrique got the better of him in quite a few ways in that game, and I think largely, Barcelona and Hansi Flick and Inzaghi and Inter Milan, I think they'll all be pretty happy with what they saw from their teams. Arteta, I think, probably less so. He did some things in that game that swung momentum back Arsenal's way without Calafiori, without Gabriel, without Thomas Partey, without Jorginho, without Kai Havertz, without Gabi Jesus, and he was able to swing the game in Arsenal's favour. No, we didn't get the goal, but Arsenal, I think, were worthy of a goal in that game, certainly, and actually did wrestle back control. And when you look at it, yes, I'm talking about these other three teams and waxing lyrical about them, but PSG threw away a 2-goal lead at Aston Villa. Barcelona conceded 3 at home and were 2-0 down in this tie, and Inter Milan threw away a 2-goal lead themselves. So when you look at that, Arsenal have defensive structures and have a defensive stability brilliantly coached by Mikel Arteta that we can build on. You build on that, you've got a chance. If we let our physicality get on top of PSG, which I think it can, and I think it can even on top of a Barcelona, especially from set pieces, and I think our midfield is probably more physical and kind of more, when it's Partey, Rice, Odegaard, I think can get on top of Inter Milan as well. I think we have our own strengths. Yes, there's so much we need to improve on. There's so much we need to improve on from an attacking perspective that I think the other three teams showed us. But defensively, there is a structure, there is a platform there that we can build on, not just for next season, before this second leg, and hopefully a final if we get there. There are strengths we have. Play to them, Arsenal, and just don't be afraid to just go, all right, we're not as good on the ball as these lot, so let's try run through them. I think that's got to be something we've got to try to do in Paris. The final thing I want to say is also don't write off the club and don't look beyond, there being a world in which, okay, and listen, I'm backing Mikel Arteta. I think he can do it. I think he can deliver, the big ones at Arsenal. I think he's a manager who's going to get to that level. But Hansi Flick, Inzaghi, and Enrique, none of them have managed in the Premier League before. And I'm not trying to say, get rid of Mikel Arteta for these guys, but these are 3 top managers, and with the platform, the players we've got, if, and it's a big if, and I'm a long way from saying it's time to move on, but if Mikel Arteta can't deliver, there are other top managers out there that can take what was an amazing platform, was a great group of players, and add their sprinkle of magic on it and take us up a level or two. We are in the Champions League semi-finals. We're looking competitive in the Champions League semi-finals without key players and with so much that this team can still learn and still improve and still do. Now, maybe you might say after 5-6 years, we should be doing this. Why are we not under Mikel Arteta? And that's a fair question. But also we're competitive, and I see loads of areas we can improve in. And I still think we have strengths that can swing this competition our way. And dare I say, we can win it without, on the eye, looking quite as impressive as these 3, because there's other fundamentals we have. So I'm positive about Arsenal's future. But we still got plenty of work to do. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Can we beat PSG? Do you agree with some of the stuff I've looked at here? And how does it change the way you feel about the transfer window and the work Arsenal have to do? because it's definitely got me thinking about the profiles a little bit more. But maybe there's another video on that. Longer video than normal, but there was quite a lot I wanted to talk about from this week. Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Go subscribe to the Goonerverse and the Goonerverse too, and I'll catch you very soon.